So I think with that, let's move on to the 401k checklist.
Yeah, I actually really like this. For people that are checklist people, I know I am. This is a good way to, after you leave the podcast, to actually put together some action to your newfound knowledge. So step number one sounds obvious, but keep an eye on your investment. So what does that mean? If your employer offers a free match, make sure you're contributing up to that level so that you're not giving away any free money, because we want to take advantage of that benefit.
And I would say that's probably the minimum, right? At a minimum.
Yeah, for sure. I think what you and I would agree on is, you want to get to 10% as quickly as you can. And then I would say every year that you have a bonus or an increase, add 1% until you get to 15%, and then revisit it to see if, now you shift other monies to investing in real estate, or if you increase that to 20%. And, whatever that number is for you. I know we have a handful of families that we serve that they're within 5 years of retirement and they've paid off all their debt. So one of them will actually contribute, 50 to 100% of their income into their SEP IRA or into their retirement account to lower their taxes, because they don't need the income. So why pay taxes on money that you don't need? So that's something for people that are close to retirement, that you have low expenses and you're not even spending what's coming in, but you're paying taxes on it. That may be something that's thoughtful for you to lower your tax bill and to give you a boost to that nest egg if you're retiring in the near future. The other thing I think is, we see people that are tempted to stop contributing, especially when the market's down. I think it's discouraging. Like in 2022, I had a handful of people that were 1 to 3 years away from retirement. And they basically said, hey, what if I just pause? Because you've said I have enough. And I'm like, well, you could pause, but then your taxes will go up because now you can't write that off. And then you're going to end up putting in a savings account that maybe makes 1 or 2% instead of into an investment account that's averaging, depending on your risk tolerance, 6 or 8 or 10 or 12. And so one of the things I would say is one of the mistakes that we see people make is within a year or a couple years of retirement, if they feel comfortable enough, they'll stop contributing and forget that they're giving up free money. How about anything else under keeping an eye on investments that you want to touch on before we move on?
Yeah. When you look at when the market's down, that's actually the best time to contribute, right? We all know, everyone's heard this a million times, right? Buy low, sell high. But it's you look at what's happening in the economy right now, and it's understandable, right? People are borrowing money. Credit card debt is at an all-time high. Personal savings is at an all-time low. It might be difficult to make those contributions, especially if you need all of the dollars you can get, right? I mean, obviously inflation potentially, we'll see how under control it is. And it looks like, the rate cut is all but done in September, but we'll see what's going to happen going forward. So it can be difficult to lower your contributions, especially when the market's, not doing great, when the economy maybe isn't as strong, because you need the additional income. But I would say, avoid that temptation as much as you can. Continue making those contributions, continue taking advantage of that employer match. I mean, that's really the best time to do it, to buy into the market when it is down, right?
Yeah. Number 2, check for target date funds. So we won't spend a ton of time because I think we did a good job. But I would just say, just because you've been in a target date fund and it's worked in the past, don't assume because it's worked that there's nothing better. I actually think one of the things that's sad is when we meet with people, they're like, hey, I've had a target date fund, basically the majority of my career. Why would I change now? You and I both know Jim Collins has a great book called Good to Great. And just on a very service level, I would just say, just because something's worked good, don't let that help you settle for something that could perform or has performed even better. And so one of the things I would say to those listening is if you've always had target date funds, and you want to know what would it look like to have a custom portfolio and how has that performed compared to what I currently have over the last 10 years, that's one of the things that we can show you as kind of just the fruit of a custom portfolio compared to having a target date fund. And I think a lot of people would be surprised of what it looks like to go from that target date fund to a custom portfolio with oftentimes the extra returns. What other things do you see in the target date funds that could be a mistake for people?
I personally don't love them, but I just think that, the whole idea of retirement or at least when you're getting close to it, like your investment philosophy, it just needs to change a little bit. and some of it's just obvious, right? You're no longer earning a paycheck. You no longer have the time on your side potentially, but it needs to change. And a lot of the fundamentals that make sense for a 20 or 30-year-old, they're not exactly the best way for you to invest going forward. And I think that, I love the expression, what got you here isn't necessarily going to get you there. And that's where, you need to look at some decisions that, that center around the type and the sources of income that you're going to have in retirement, whether that's, like many Americans, 2/3 of Americans rely on Social Security. I'm sorry, everybody relies on Social Security, but to make up 2/3 of your income, right? Where Social Security accounts for 2/3 of most Americans on average, their income in retirement. Not everybody has a pension, right? Pensions are going down. To what extent are you relying on your retirement savings to fund your retirement, your daily activities, your expenses that you have? And I think that is maybe the first question that you need to answer. And you need to put a lot of effort, and hopefully you're working with somebody who can help you do this, into putting a portfolio together that helps you succeed in retirement. What's the chance of success? What are the odds that you're going to make it and you're not going to run out, that you're going to be able to live in retirement without compromising your lifestyle? Like, that's an important thing to ask. And I think that, target funds, even though they can get you there potentially, there's probably a better way to do it. There's probably there's probably more thought and more customization that can happen to help your portfolio perform the way you need it to.
Yeah, well said. Number 4, it's your money. Take time to control your retirement savings. So is your advisor or your employer really helping you with your investments? Or do they kind of have a set it and forget it mentality? One of the things I ask people all the time that have a financial advisor, and a lot of people have great ones, but I'll say, hey, outside of investing your money, the 1% or the 1.25% or the 1.5% that you're paying him or her, what is it getting you? And they look at me like, well, what else could they do for me? And one of the things I would challenge people is don't pay 1% just for somebody to pick funds and forget them. What's typically a sign that you've been a set and forget client? One is you still have more than 40% of your money in bonds. You look at the safe money world, and a lot of people know that's kind of my focus, is there's so many better tools today with money market, T-bills, no fee annuities. And so if you're in a model where you're paying 1% and you're in a set and forget it, where you have all these bonds that used to work in the past and they haven't been performing like they used to, you're probably in one of those models. For that 1%, you should be getting tax advice. You should be getting planning. You should be getting at least, 2, 3, 4 appointments a year, reviewing the changes you have around your expenses and inflation and the market. And if you're not getting all of that for 1%, in my opinion, you're overpaying. You should be getting more for your fee than just the funds that they put in there. So take control. If you've been passive and you've just trusted your guy or your gal, hey, this is your money. Nobody cares about it more than you do. So get a second opinion. In fact, Yelisey, you and I, one of the things that we love to do for people is give them a second opinion. And I think one of the things that surprises people is if people have a good advisor and their plan is working, we're not worried about telling people that. I had a couple recently, and I said, hey guys, your investments look good. They're low cost. They're performing well. And I said, if I were you, I'd keep doing what you were doing. And I kind of laughed because he looked at me and he said, so you don't want our business? And I thought, it's not that I don't want it. I told him, I said, I just think your guys doing a good job. I said, but one of the areas that we could help you is tax strategy, because that's something that you're not getting. And one of the things that you and I find a lot, Yelisey, is a lot of people have a tax preparer, and a tax preparer is somebody that looks back at what you could have done, where a tax strategist is looking forward. And if you don't have a tax strategist that's looking forward at your tax planning opportunities, that's an area where we can help sit down and show you whether there's opportunities or if you're already taking advantage of all of them. Anything you want to say to wrap up before we go into the next piece as we wrap up the podcast here?
Well, it's amazing how, we sit down with folks and they always tell us, well, my CPA said I should have done this. I go, oh, is it your first year working with him? No. Why didn't he tell you in the beginning of the year or before, hey, is this like the first time he's noticing it too? Like, he's been doing your taxes for 5 years. Why are the ideas coming after the return is prepared? So you really want to make sure that you're working with somebody who's thinking a little bit more strategically, I would say, than just simply preparing your return. A lot of these guys, they're getting the returns done in 10, 15 minutes because they have 300 to 500 returns that they're trying to crank out. And for them to sit down and to spend a little bit of time, I mean, that's next to impossible during tax season. So a lot of the work actually happens outside of tax season, outside of that prep season, right? Where you're actually sitting down with somebody like us or a CPA throughout the year who's helping you plan and be strategic.